Who knows much about Pareto Principle, 80-20,
I had a
Matthew
quick
effect,
look.
blah, 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 blah.
I had a quick look on Monday in like preparation when I thought we was doing Monday. So is it like the 80-20 thing, like 20% of what you do gives you 8% of results, where like 80% of what you do give you 20% of the results? Some shit like that.
They mentioned it in the 4-hour work week.
Yeah, Ferris bangs on about it all the time. Yeah, all of that lot do. All of those people go on about it, and they hugely kind of oversell it. Whose phone is ringing? Oh, Hannon, is that you?
No, fuck off.
Whose phone's ringing?
It was Herschel. He was muted.
Herschel, is that you? Unbelievable, brilliant. Yeah, so we'll kind of go on to we'll briefly go to the origins and stuff as well, but it's referred to as Pareto Principle, 80-20 rule or law, law of the vital few, which is kind of what this part says as well, and the Matthew effect as well, which is interesting. I've thrown that in there too. So Richard Koch is the guy who actually wrote the 80-20 books. He was the one that kind of coined the term 80-20. The books are decent. He's wrote a lot of stuff as well on like successful people, like unusually successful people and various things. You find that like this Pareto principle has been heavily adopted by the business people and all that kind of stuff. Basic quote, which pretty much sums it up. It gives to work out the few things that are really important and the few methods that will give us what we really want. So it is finding the things that are effective and more effective than everything else, and then basically working with those. Okay. The origins, Wilfredo Pareto, years ago he lived, 1848 to 1923. He was the one that originally kind of noticed this effect of this distribution. He did it on various things, but the main kind of data set that he did it on was like wealth distribution and income in a working population. And what he found, what he consistently found over various time periods and locations, there was a very kind of robust effect of this. There was a small minority who accounted for a substantial amount of the income and the wealth. So again, if you think about the way it is nowadays as well, wealth distribution and income, if you look at the world population and things, if you analyze that, you would have a very similar thing. You have these people in these small minority that account for a kind of disproportionate amount of the kind of the wealth and the income. Okay. What it basically is, and what the Pareto principle, which came from this work, states, is that 20%. So these are exact numbers we're talking about, but they're not kind of exact, if that makes sense. So obviously if they said like between this and this, it wouldn't really kind of work. So the numbers are that they will differ, and there will be variability between the numbers. Okay. But basic rule is 20% of distribution usually accounts for 80% of its power. So if you have, again, with wealth and a population, you have a population, 80% of that wealth is accounted for by 20% of the population. So 80% of that wealth belongs to 20% of the population, and the remaining 20% of the wealth will basically belong to the 80% that remains. Okay, does that make sense? So we're looking at breaking anything down into 20%, and according to this kind of law or this principle, that 20% will account for 80% of the output or the power, the impact of the wealth, or whatever you are looking at. Okay, and it is an uneven or very much a non-linear distribution. So I will throw up a Pareto kind of distribution graph later, but anyone who knows anything about kind of general distribution and Gaussian distribution, all this kind of stuff, it is not in any way a normal distribution. It is a very much a skewed non-linear distribution. Okay, and just to reiterate that fact, it is not an exact science. These are not exact numbers. If you don't get exactly 20%, it's got accounting for exactly 80%. It doesn't, doesn't matter. It's a general kind of rule, and as well, people have misapplied it, and they almost kind of treat it as this kind of like magical kind of filter, almost like like a panacea or like a silver bullet. It depends what you apply it to. It then depends what you do with that kind of information that you gain from applying the Pareto principle as well. And it does not fix everything. And as I say, the problem I have with it, and what kind of pisses me off a lot with it, it's just been massively hijacked by these kind of get rich quick wankers and like almost like life coach fucktards, like, and they're all, oh, you've got an 80-20 this and blah, 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 blah. And they're just hugely fucking overreaching what it actually fucking means. And they're doing it in a very general term. They're not actually telling you how it's going to help in an actionable way. But that kind of sector is basically full of kind of sensationalized bullshit like that people buy and think they're going to get rich. But there is a usable kind of thread in the Pareto principle, in my opinion, but not to the extent that some people will kind of blow it out of proportion to. One thing I found interesting, so the next one I didn't know about until I read. I think I've read it in a has anyone done any of Jordan Peterson stuff? Some of you must have read Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
What was the rules for life? 15, 16, 12, something rules for
12
life.
12
I
rules
think
for
it was in that. Yeah, it was 12 rules. It was in that. So I didn't know until I read that book like a few months ago that it was referred to as like the Matthew effect as well. And this is more, they use this term in the economics more. It's from basically taken from the Bible. And it's from a quote in the Bible from Jesus, who obviously didn't exist, so it isn't really a quote. It's basically a made-up sentence from a fictional character that has been attributed to someone that people think lived that didn't, if that makes any sense. Okay, so this isn't real. Okay, this is, even though it's in quotations, okay, I'm basically quoting a fictional character here. I'm not quoting a real person. Okay, and what the fictional character Jesus Christ said was, or I think they paraphrase this as well. I don't think it's exactly how it is in the actual the Bible. To those who have everything, more will be given. From those who have nothing, everything will be taken. Okay, which kind of applies to the Pareto. It's the more you have, the more you get, and the less you have, then it's how it works. It's basically Jesus Christ describing an uneven distribution. Okay, so that. I find it interesting because I think religion's hilarious. So to apply it to something which is actually statistics and fact, I just find it really funny. So I had to kind of throw that in there. The other one as well, which I got from the Peterson book, which I also find very interesting. There's a lot of I think the Pareto is referred to as what's like a power law or something. Has anyone done mathematics or physics or anything like that?
A long time ago, yeah.
Right, I think it's called a power law. I don't know a massive amount about power laws, and I haven't read into it. But I mean, probably would be very beneficial to read into what a power law is. But another one which is referred to as a power law is something called Price's law. Does anyone know what Price's law is?
No.
Nope.
Good. That means it's not been made super cool and commercial and get rich quick and all this kind of bollocks. So Price's law is quite an interesting one. I didn't know about it. I was kind of pointed towards it by the Peterson book and kind of started going down a rabbit hole with it. Price's law basically states that whatever you're looking at, whether it's work production or whatever, so 50% of what is done, okay, is done by the square root of the number of contributors. Okay, now it sounds complex, and I had to obviously get calculated the square roots because I'm not very good. But whatever you have, so if you have a number of techniques and you have whether they're successful or not, so you have the results of that, you take the square root of the number of techniques, and what you should find, if Price's law is right, is 50% of the successful techniques should be accounted for by the square root of the number of techniques. Okay, or again, if you have a team of people working on a project, the output from that team, so 50% of the output from that team will be done by the square root of the number of people working on that output. Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah.
I believe those numbers are right, if anyone knows anything about square roots. So if you have 10 people, 10 techniques, 10 whatever the fuck you're looking at, the square root would be 3. So 3 people would make up 50%. 110, 1,032, 10,000, 100. Okay. Again, I'm horrific at mathematics, so again, I use the calculator. I assume the calculator is right. Price's law is interesting, as I say, okay, because we will come back to it when we start looking at various kind of statistics that I've managed to steal from people. Why do we give a shit? So this is the most important thing, because Pareto's law, Pareto's principle, Price's law, all this kind of stuff's really clever, and you get kind of nice output and or nice kind of results out of it, and data and things. But like, well, what the fuck can you do with it? So there's no point just looking at it as a general purpose. We might as well apply it to what we're looking to do. So as far as grappling and stuff's concerned, this is a way I'm trying to look at things anyway. So it's about what you're focusing your time on training. Okay, I've had this conversation before. I've kind of gone over this generally with a lot of you before. It allows you to kind of look at the more high percentage techniques. Now, high percentage techniques, again, this is debatable, but if you look at, again, everything is as reliable or as strong as the data you look at. Now, if you have good data, and you have data from very high level competitors and what works in high level competition, then that data with the application of Pareto should give you a group of techniques or a group of concepts or whatever you're looking at that are kind of unnaturally effective, and they have a significantly higher rate of success than everything else. Okay, so again, sequences and kind of paths of techniques, this is something that I haven't gone into, but there's a lot more kind of research needs to be done it. Understanding of which positions occur more often and where from. So this is when I start looking at various techniques and things. I'm like, the best way is best example for me is I've talked about before, like with the guillotine. Okay, now with the guillotine, you have 2 general forms. You have one where there's an arm in guillotine and one where there's an arm out guillotine. Okay, now what directed my kind of training and what I chose to put my time into was just generally watching people roll, generally rolling myself. What positions occur most often? Am I going to be in positions that allow me to go for the arm in guillotine or the arm out guillotine? Okay, and as from what I kind of looked at, again, it's more of a case that I didn't kind of get the data to do this, but you are in a position where you have a head and arm control more than you do kind of just the head with no arm. Okay, so I chose to go down the route of the head and arm attack as opposed to the no arm, because it naturally occurs more often than positions where you can attack the no arm guillotine. I feel I've described that really badly. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Horrendously described. Yeah. But basically, if you look at a technique, how versatile is the technique? Okay, if there's one technique that's really good, but it can only be applied from one position, and that position is really hard to get to, or the other option is training a technique that, again, you could say maybe not as effective to kind of finish, not as easy to finish, but it can be applied from more positions, and those positions are more frequently available. So it basically accounts for more opportunity, if that makes sense. Okay, so again, it can lead to better usage of your training time. There's no point spending time training something which is going to be low percentage, or it's going to have low kind of opportunity to apply the technique. That's the key thing. So when we apply it to grappling, that's what I'm kind of looking at. Underlying reasons in grappling. Okay, because again, what we're talking about the data, what comes out. We're talking about a trend. We're talking about almost like a correlation almost. That doesn't mean we know why. Okay, and that there can be underlying factors as to why the data says this. Okay, so as far as I have kind of seen, these are some of the main principles or the main reasons why. Okay, so some things you've seen more finishes from or more effective, and they account for more kind of variance because they are mechanically efficient. Okay, they are better techniques mechanically. Now, they will usually be from a position where you have an advantage, you have a mechanical advantage, like the back or various things, okay? What you're going to find with these, they're going to be long-term. These are very unlikely to change, okay, because they are inherently more efficient because of the mechanics. So they should be longer lasting, they should last long-term. Now, you potentially can have short-term techniques or positions that will yield really, really high percentage finishes or high percentage kind of positions due to novelty, okay? And this can be down to the fact that somebody does something different. It might be slightly different. It might be something that people haven't worked on, but they become very proficient at something which other people haven't experienced that much. Okay, like I'm going to write something on this anyway because I'm kind of intrigued by it. But if you have someone who starts to do something that no one else, in a position that no one else is used to, 50-50 is a really good one, actually. When 50-50 started to occur, there was a shitload of finishes from there. Okay, again, with the leg locks, another good example. If you go back 5 years ago, the leg lock finishes was significantly higher than what they kind of are or are becoming. They are starting to drop off. Now, they are mechanically efficient, but the defenses now are also mechanically efficient. Now, the reason they were so high percentage back sort of 3, 4, 5 years ago was because people weren't aware of those positions. They weren't aware of what was going on. Now, as the knowledge has increased and people's awareness has increased, they have started training those positions. So they're now experiencing those positions. They're restricted sparring those positions in training. So they're developing kind of a schema or like an intuitive kind of reactions to these positions. Previously, when they didn't have them, they're not going to know how to react. So there's going to be this kind of novelty effect where there will be a significant amount of kind of success from them. Okay. Rule sets is huge as well, because some rule sets kind of funnel people into certain positions. They funnel people into certain submissions. They create certain passes and certain kind of point scoring positions and sequences. So you can have very, very different results depending on the rule set. Okay. The other thing is individual specialization. Some people become incredibly good at very, very specific things. So you may have something which is maybe not high percentage, but somebody is a specialist in that. So there may be almost kind of outlying data where someone is just so good at a random thing that they can make it work on most people. They have spent an abnormal amount of time specializing in an obscure technique. Okay. Do they all make sense or roughly make sense?
Yeah.
Good. This is pretty much what Pareto Principle or Pareto Distribution will look like, roughly. Okay. So there is a significant drop-off in effect as things go along. So there will be a few factors, or 20% of the factors, which will account for a significant amount, and then it will kind of tail off and be significantly kind of longer tails. You will have seen kind of distributions like bell curves and Gaussian distributions and stuff, but this is what we're kind of looking at. It is a hugely kind of skewed, uneven distribution. Okay, we'll come back to it. Right, statistics. None of this is relevant unless you have something to apply it to. This is the thing. So actually using the Pareto Principle and Price's law is irrelevant unless you have good data or any kind of data to apply it to. Okay, so I've stolen a shitload of data from, does anyone follow School of Grappling on Instagram? A guy called Andy from Germany. Nobody knows him. Ed, you must have. He's not here yet, is he? Damn
He
it.
is here, but he just wandered off.
Yeah.
Right, well, he's
back. He's back.
So School of Grappling is a weird guy. Like I've been following him maybe two plus years now, and like people are starting to pay attention to him. But he's like people now know who he is. Like I remember when he first started, I started following him. It was amazing because he was talking about like kind of embodied action and perception, all this kind of shit. And he was doing like what really drew me to him was the ADCC statistics. He basically sat down and watched ADCC. And he broke it down into submission finishes, positions, and all this kind of shit, which is like, it's so time consuming that why anyone would do it voluntarily without being paid is mind boggling. But what happened is he's managed to create a shitload of data that I've managed to steal and I can kind of run it through the filter of like the Pareto and Price's law. Okay.
He's interviewed on that Sonny Brown podcast.
Sonny Brown, I was going to say, he's been on Sonny, hasn't he? And like he's now in with Preet, and people are starting to pay attention to him. He's got some radical kind of ideas. Like some of the stuff is a little bit crazy, and it's a little bit kind of out there, as it were. He's very wrestling based as well, which I find quite interesting, but he's got some really fucking good points. And he's also got some really fucking good data sets, which is the most important thing. So it's at School of Grappling. This is on Instagram. So pretty much everything I think everything I have, all the statistics are stolen from him. Okay, just to credit him. I did not make these statistics. I damn sure didn't sit down, watch all the fucking footage, and collect these statistics either. Okay. So ADCC trials, 2018, 2019. Okay, just have a look quickly. I mentioned the top 6 tonight, Ed, just to prove a point with the class as well. Okay. Everyone taking that in roughly?
Yeah.
Rear naked is choke. It's not just being behind someone naked. That would be, I mean, the submission rate would be higher if you were just behind someone naked, because I would damn tap. Obviously, heel hooks are broken into 2. Knee bars, ankle locks, toe hold are separated out of the leg locks. There is misc at the bottom as well. The one thing you have to kind of take into account that it isn't into account, we're working on these percentages. So when we work out things like what 20% of the kind of the contributing factors are, we would just kind of look at, my cursor's not there. We would look at basically rear naked choke all the way down, all of these data points we would look at, and we would calculate what 20% of that was. Okay, now there's 2 on there that there was no submissions with, an Americana wrist lock, but anything where a submission was attempted, as far as I'm concerned, would be classed as a data point on here, whether there wasn't a point or not. Okay, because if we took away Americanas and wrist locks because there was no data, it would then affect whether it was 20% of the kind of input. So basically, if any submission which was attempted should be on that kind of list. Now, I don't know whether there was other submissions attempted that weren't on the list. MISC as well at the bottom. There's 14 submissions which are undefined. Now, the likelihood is those 14 submissions were separate submissions as well. They were different types of submissions. So again, that would change the data and the statistics. I haven't taken that into account. Okay. So the numbers would be slightly different if I did that, just to be, just to make a point of that. So if we apply this to Pareto, we apply this to Price's law, we have data on the right-hand side there. Okay. PL stands for Price's law, and that just basically means 4 is the square root of, I believe it's 19. So we have 19 inputs from rear naked all the way down to miss. Okay. So 4 is what should account for 50% of the data under Price's law. Okay. Now, there is a significant kind of amount of data accounted for by a very small proportion here. So even just looking at the bar chart, you can see that it's a massively uneven distribution. There is a small minority contributing to a significant amount of the kind of success. Okay. So if we have the top 3, which are rear naked chokes and heel hooks. Now, 3 of the inputs account for 16%. So this isn't 20%, it's 16%. And what you get out of that is you get 53%. So 53% of the successful submission finishes at the trials are accounted for by 3 submissions, 3 types. Okay. RNC, inside heel hook, outside heel hook. Now, you could combine the heel hooks into just one, but I believe inside and outside heel hooks are very, very different submissions. So they need to be separated. Okay. So off the bat, Price's law fits pretty well. So we have basically 3, which is almost slightly less than what Price's law says, and it accounts for 53%. It is slightly off on the Pareto. Okay. If we throw in all the leg locks, so we put in knee bars, ankle locks, and toe holds, and then we have the RNC, that's 32% of the input. and that accounts for 64% of the output. Okay, so again, it's slightly off on the Pareto, and as far as I'm concerned, the Price's law kind of fits that a little bit neater than Pareto. Okay, but again, does it matter? This is the thing. All that matters is you can see that attacking RNC from the back or leg locks, 64% of the submissions. Okay, so that is like 2/3 of the submission finishes were from that. That's a very, very kind of isolated and small area of kind of attack and grappling. Okay. If I flip it onto its side, MISC obviously should be put actually in the center because it's done on kind of rank order. It shouldn't be like that. It should be neater if he'd done the fucking graph properly. But I mean, look, it's almost a fucking perfect fit for the Pareto as well. Like, it's a very clear, uneven like skew distribution. Does that make sense? It must make sense.
Yeah, no, it does.
Visually, it should fucking make sense.
Yeah.
I go back, it's like, oh, okay, cool. But then we go back to Pareto. I throw that's a natural Pareto distribution. That's the graph. It's the same. It's a similar distribution. It's an uneven distribution. Okay, so Pareto does apply, but if we're talking numbers wise, the Price's law applies and fits a little bit better. But as I say, doesn't really matter. All that matters is what it allows us to do is see where the finishes are coming. So potentially it's going to make us spend more time training these areas and finishes. As far as I'm concerned, I'm going to spend a fuckload more time training my submission escapes and defenses for them, because clearly that's where people are going for the finishes. Points scored. So these are the finals, okay? So there is slightly different between where the data is collected from. Previously, it was the trials, which are significantly more fights because it's trials all around the world. Finals are once every 2 years, and it is 5 divisions, 16 competitors in each division, okay? Points scored. It's pretty obvious where most points are scored from, okay? So it's back control. Now, the caveats, I didn't look at the ADCC scoring. I fucking should have. If somebody very quickly wants to look on their phone and find out what points are scored for what position in ADCC rules, please do it now while I'm continuing to talk, so we can bring that in. What also needs to be considered as well is, again, rule set, which hugely affects everything. Points cannot be scored in the first half of fights ADCC. So any ADCC fight, the first half of the fight, no points are scored, okay? Now, what would be interesting is if points were scored, whether the point scoring would be different in the first half. I believe it would, because I think what you'll get is you will get potentially the guard being passed in the first half of the fight where no points are scored. So you are then in a position when the points become live to take the back without having to pass the guard, okay? So again, these things have to be considered, and if you look at the data and you just look at what what's in front of you, that doesn't come into account. Okay, if it was a fair kind of, if it was the same thing first half and second half, then the starting position at the beginning would have to be the same. The likelihood is at the second half of the fight, you're not going to be in a neutral starting position. Potentially, you could be in side control, you could be in an advantageous position. Okay, so that being said, that's kind of irrelevant because we just want to look at where the points have come from anyway. And obviously the back takes where the main amount of points are. Has nobody done this yet? Has nobody looked at the ADCC scoring? Is this kind of a diffusion? It's a diffusion of responsibility, isn't it? It's everyone assumes everyone else is going to do it.
I just posted it in the chat.
I can't see it because I've got fucking Keynote on my computer, dickhead. Tell me.
What do you want to know?
Which Keynote? This is the problem. I want to know all of this.
Which point
tell me
do you want to know?
Shut up, all of you. Just tell me some points. Go through. There's 6 things. There's 6 things on the screen.
I'll tell you. So, passing the guard equals 3 points. Knee on stomach equals 2 points. Mount position equals 2 points. Back mount with hook equals 3 points. Hooks, sorry, plural. Takedown, which ends in guard or half guard, 2 points. A clean takedown, which ends with the guard passed, 4 points. Sweep, which ends in guard or half guard, 2 points. Clean sweep, again, if you've passed the guard, 4 points. And then there's some other kind of italics.
Okay.
I can't bother to read.
That's interesting. So I never considered, like, I didn't really pay attention to the fact that you can get, if you pass the guard on a sweep or you pass the guard and take the extra points. So that makes it kind of more interesting. So we'll carry on anyway, but that is something that would need to be taken into account then. So, like, if you're comparing back points to mount points, one of them significantly scores more points than the other. Okay, there is a bigger disparity, I think, in IBJJF. So there's a lot of 2 points and 4 points. So, but that needs to be taken into account as well. Okay. However, so if we break this down and we apply it to the principles of laws, obviously there's 6 and price law is 2. So 2 things should basically account for 50%. Now the back accounts for 49%. So 49% of the points awarded at the finals came from people establishing back control. Okay, that's a huge amount. And it's also very interesting as well when you go back to previously and you look at what the highest percentage submission is, which is the RNC. So again, this really should be pushing your training towards the back. Okay, if you throw in the takedown, it accounts for 67% of the points. Okay, so again, applying it to Pareto and Price, the back is about 20%, but it only makes 50%, so it's not quite a fit. And again, back and takedown, you have the prices law because you have the 2 kind of input factors, but it is contributing more than what prices law says, 67%. But again, irrelevant. Okay, what this tells you is you need to work on the back. You need to think about the back because that's where the most points are scored. That's where the most submissions come from. Throw in takedowns, learn a bit of wrestling, and this is why ADCC is hugely geared towards wrestlers. Okay, we move on. So yeah, if we break it down, so this is then looking at just the 2019s, and again, it's back control again. So it's pretty much a replication of this. So the assumption is that there hasn't been much of a difference between sort of the 2-year progression from 2017 to 2019. Passing is slightly higher than takedowns this time, but like, I mean, it was only 6 points before, and there's only a point in it this time. Okay, but it's the trend is pretty much, it's very, very similar. Again, if you look at it here, it's slightly less points scored for the back, but again, back and takedown is still the same. It's just the numbers are slightly lower, but not enough to like change everything. It's not like a complete change in the way the game is played. It hasn't been a huge trend towards the mount or people doing more takedowns or getting more sweeps. Okay, so it is still, the same things are still earning the points for the competitors, which, if it comes down to the points, that's what's winning the fights. Back takes, because the last sort of few things we've looked at have pretty much pushed us towards the back. So where the submissions are highly likely to finish, that's also where the points are being scored. So we then look at where the people are taking the back from. Okay, again, scrambles and misc at the bottom. It just looks untidy because it kind of should be in there, but that's obviously that's a category that has multiple things which are kind of almost like undefinable, or you can't really categorize them and kind of match them up. So we will consider it, but we don't make a big deal about it. What's important is the first 2 positions are basically the same. Okay, they're not the same, but they're very, very closely related. Front headlock is turtle. Okay, so turtle is more than likely applying to like a rear or side turtle position. So it's when you are behind and it's hip to hip. You start to try and take the back from there. You work from there. Front headlock is basically when you're at the front of the turtle. Okay, so the first 2 things that account for the most effect or the most variance are from the same position. They are from the turtle position. Okay, then it's Kimura, arm drag, and then we start looking into again, like Berimbolo, crab rides, and you're not going to get, they're not high percentage, really, are they? We look at the data. We look at the application of the laws and the principles. Three things, or three of the techniques or the positions should account for 50%. What we have is the turtle accounts, rear and front. So we're splitting into the two. That accounts for 51%. So 51% of the back takes come from some form of the turtle, whether it's a front headlock style or front turtle position, or it's a rear turtle position. So that is where the back takes are being established. Okay. Again, very, very important, because if you don't train turtle and you don't understand turtle, you really fucking need to be. And that is, again, if we break it down into Paretos, that's 25%. So again, Pareto is slightly off again. Price's law is a better fit. If you throw in the Kimura, you have 62% of the back takes. So 62% of the back takes are from the turtle, or they are from some form of a kind of Kimura figure of four grip on the arm. It's a massive amount, because again, it's about 2/3 again, which is a significant amount. So that is where people are getting to the back, which is the position that scores the most points, and it's the position that allows the most finishes. Okay, so we'll be kind of working backwards here. We're looking at the positions that are allowing us to get to the highest point scoring, the highest submission positions. Okay, UFC submissions. Okay, I haven't done the data on these. So the ADCC system is finished, but we'll talk about it later, because it has a pretty fucking clear trend to it as far as I'm concerned. And this is why I've been focused on the back and turtle and front headlock and stuff. People still with me? Oh my God, everyone's gone. I'm just going to leave.
No.
Have a look at this, because there's a lot on there. Have a look. There's the raw data numbers inside the pie, and obviously there is percentages on the outside underneath the name of the submission. Obviously, there is a significant amount of submissions accounted for by just RNCs, which you would assume would be from the back, because that's the only place you can get them from. Other, I have no fucking idea, because there has been some random submissions in UFC.
Tap to strike.
Sorry?
Tap to strikes.
Tap to strikes could be other. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would be. I would. You know what? I would have thought that would have accounted for more, maybe, but
well,
maybe not. Maybe it's referee stoppage, isn't it? To be fair, like the referee normally gets in.
Strikes to rear naked choke would be a lot.
That would be interesting. The data does not allow us to incorporate that kind of theory. It would be interesting. I 100% agree. 100% I agree. I believe that, yeah, I think a lot of the RNC setups will come from this. This just tells us that the RNC is the finish and how many there were. We can pretty safely assume that they were all from a back position, because that's where the RNC is finished. But it does not allow us to kind of get any insight into how it was set up. Now, whether it was done on kind of a first phase, like they got the first phase hand fight, like they got the RNC, they got the arm under the chin on the back take, whether they had to hand fight, whether they used some form of an arm trap, whether they just punched the guy in the face, punched the guy in the ribs, and then went from there. Like, that would be interesting, but that would also mean going back and now looking at all the fucking fights and breaking that data down, okay? Which one of you should probably do, and I might promote you if you did that. Guillotines, arm bars, arm triangles, anacondas, and DARS. Yeah, so it doesn't differentiate between arming guillotine and no arm guillotine, which I think is quite important, but we can't really worry about that. So I haven't run the numbers on this. I don't think it was that kind of important, but I thought it was interesting to look at it anyway, because I had the statistics up and I was nicking shit off his website anyway. They're all fucking chokes, basically. Like that's the main thing. Okay, so if you're looking to develop a high percentage of finishes in MMA, you want to be looking at perfecting chokeholds. You want to be looking at positions that are going to allow you to attack chokeholds, primarily the back if you can, or finding a choke that you can specialize in and then finding positions to get to it. Okay. As I say, it doesn't account for, I'm not saying that you're only going to get finishes if you do what everyone else is doing, because there is, as I say, there is the novelty, massive novelty effect potentially if you can find something so different and so obscure that people don't have the kind of experience and the schema to kind of deal with it. Then
North South.
look, I'm not. Yeah, look, I think that's again. I think high percentage and low percentage. I think it's got to be interpreted with a little bit of kind of common sense. I think there's some certain things out there that could be very successful for certain people, but what it would require would be committing a significant amount of time to specialize in that area. You're playing against the numbers. So if that makes sense. Everyone kind of with me with that? Any interesting comments about any of that?
Yeah,
seriously, you
get
need
to the back.
guys.
Get to the back. Got it.
Yeah.
Get to the back.
So I'm not telling you to do that anymore. I don't feel I should ever need to tell you to do this anymore, because I felt like I constantly had to tell people to go to the back, take the back, all this kind of shit, and I now feel I don't have to tell any of you people to do this, especially no geek, because you should have fucking drawn those conclusions yourself from the data we've just looked at. Okay, is anyone in doubt with that at all?
No, yeah, stats speak for themselves. Print it out, put it on the wall of your gym.
Numbers don't lie. I mean, statistics do.
Statistics lie.
don't lie, but statistics.
Just like Scott Steiner would say, the numbers don't lie.
I've read a book on statistics actually, which is really, really interesting, and it's I say interesting, it was more terrifying. You can fuck people with statistics so badly.
Oh yeah, it's so easy to manipulate.
It just depends how you run it and whether you do multiple tests and various things, and it's terrifying. And then obviously the normal kind of layman and people who believe conspiracy theories can be swayed by kind of doctoring of the statistics.
As the Homer Simpson quote when he becomes the vigilante, he's like, people use statistics to prove anything. 40% of people know that.
The best one is like 75% of statistics are made up on the spot. That kind of thing. It's like,
yeah,
it's just for fuck yeah. It's true though. That's the only thing. But yeah, with statistics, obviously, you need to be able to kind of say where the data came from. So you need to be able to kind of tell how the data was collected, where it was collected. You also need to very, very, very fucking clearly state how the statistics were ran on it. And you also need to be, if you're putting in peer-reviewed journals and various things, you should be keeping your raw data and all this kind of stuff. So if there's any queries or anyone has an issue, you should be able to provide the raw data that you got your results from, so other people can run statistics on it.
Ed,
yes.
Question.
Yeah.
What do you think accounts for in MMA? You're saying like leg locks. That's all leg locks, 3.2%. But when we look at all leg locks in ADCC, they're huge. It's huge. Yeah. So like that's a huge. Is it just because people aren't good at them in MMA, or is it the danger of getting to them? What do you think accounts for the difference?
It's a little bit of both. Little column A, little column B. I think there is a big gap, and there is a significant kind of opportunity to apply leg locks in MMA. I think they are behind the curve as far as that's concerned. However, there are certain things that have to be taken into account. A lot of the time when you're inverting, a lot of the time when you are like half guard, for instance, if you're underhooking the far leg and you're trying to go onto a leg lock on the far side, a lot of these positions you could take significant strikes to the head. So I believe that there can be a very, very effective MMA leg lock game system style, whatever you want to call it. But I don't think anyone's really applied it or figured it out yet. Because as I say, it is not a direct kind of, you don't just transpose it over from grappling. Because like I kind of mentioned before, rule sets make a fucking big difference. So I think that's the thing. And maybe people just because again, maybe people look at this and they use these kind of statistics and they go, oh, look, leg locks don't work. And maybe they don't train leg locks. So this is, as I say, all this has to be, you have to kind of filter through it and you have to look at it from other points of view as well. Because like you say, the leg locks look terrible in MMA. Now, if somebody was just a very kind of concrete, hard application of Pareto and Price, then they would train very, very little time in leg locks. And that makes sense because that's what the data is telling you to do. But you don't get the full story from the data. There is kind of trends and there's changes in training and various things like that. And that is not accounted for in the data. You have to be able to look at other places and you have to be able to look at future trends and various things that aren't seen in the data. If you just apply to that data and then potentially you're going to miss out on different kind of innovations and trends, like all innovation, any kind of innovation or huge kind of breakthrough, whether it's in kind of science or, you know, in grappling and sport or whatever, it comes from someone doing something that's different. It comes from someone maybe in MMA spending time doing leg locks and applying a leg lock game. Like it's like the application of the unreasonable man almost. Like if the reasonable man just goes down the path of follow the statistics and the unreasonable man does something different. You don't innovate, you don't progress without doing something different, if that makes sense. So all inventors are trying to do something different. They're kind of going against the grain and against the curve. So if everybody does follow this kind of route, and it will potentially stifle or kind of dampen down any kind of innovation and creativity in grappling and various things. So I really appreciate what it shows and everything, and I think it is important, but I don't want people to apply it as a kind of a concrete application and a hard application. I think you need to understand why it's not good as well, and why potentially there are holes in people's games and there are holes in the system that can be kind of exploited. So does that random kind of monologue answer your question?
Yeah, that's good. That's interesting, especially from you, Mr. Science Man, to say that there is a space for creativity.
Well, there has to be. Like, again, any kind of innovation comes from someone doing something different. Yeah, that's the thing. And that's what science is as well, though. Science is about changing things. It's about running an experiment, finding the results, and then changing something. It's about doing something different. It's not about copying people. It's the complete fucking opposite. Like science and scientific research is super creative, because every time you're doing something different. You're never repeating the same things. You're repeating the same things to get results to kind of validify and prove your point. But then as you try and progress things, you have to change. You can't, if you kept repeating the same fucking experiment all the time, there'd be no progression. There has to be innovation, there has to be change. You have to tweak or change a variable, else you will not get any further than where you are. So I believe that's the same with grappling. I believe that's the same with MMA. I think it's the same with everything. So
I feel like saying that creativity within the context of knowing what is.
This will allow you to know what works, what doesn't work, and it will allow you to more effectively be creative, because it allows you to potentially see where the holes are as well. Because it might make you think, well, you'll look at something that maybe, well, I'm actually I do quite well at that. Why are the numbers so low with that? And it will kind of allow you to then focus on that and maybe try and be creative with that. And so you don't, the data doesn't necessarily completely sway you to just copy it. What it can do is it can open up like little holes where potentially maybe the numbers are a bit low. Why are the numbers so low there? Do the numbers need to be that low? Are people missing something? Why are leg locks so low in MMA? Like, surely they work. Leg locks definitely work. So why is it? Maybe there's an issue. Maybe we could change something there then. So then you start looking at tweaking things, and you start applying leg lock theory and changing variables within that to MMA, and then trying to progress with it. So I think people just follow kind of results and data like that as if that's the way it should be, and this is obviously what we should be doing. But there's a complete flip side to it, that potentially it lets you see where there's gaps and where there's holes that you could be exploiting that other people aren't exploiting. Because you can be damn sure that everyone is training the back, everyone is training leg locks, everyone is training RNCs, everyone's training that kind of shit. So if you really want to risk it and kind of go out on a fucking completely different path and maybe have a shitload of success, you find something else, and you try and find something that is mechanically very, very efficient, but for whatever reason is not having as much success. Because again, that's what it comes down to too. You have to look at in grappling, you have to look at what you're trying to do. Some techniques are more, again, mechanically efficient than others. They are better control. There are some that aren't so good, and that's probably why the numbers are low. But again, we're looking at this now. Leg locks are mechanically efficient. That number is obscenely low, and there is a significant grappling portion in MMA. So going down that route would be logical because the data has shown you there's potentially a gap there. We have looked into it and we have established that mechanically, as far as grappling is concerned, leg locks are pretty fucking sound. And again, we've looked at grappling and they're very successful. So why can't they be successful in MMA? So that would be then that innovation, and that would be the route you would then go down.
People fear them, so they duck them, like Ryan Hall.
Yeah, I mean, look at Ryan Hall.
That'll be higher if you had
again,
well, that's a good point.
To an extent, how successful was Huzumar Polaris with leg locks? His leg lock game was fucking terrible. That was a really crappy, really inefficient leg lock game, and he did really well with it. So it'll be interesting with the transition of a lot of the leg lockers now. I mean, you've got Gordon Ryan, who again, man, he shot to a Ashi Garami and leg locked a guy in one. You don't see that very often. That worked clearly, didn't it? You have Gordon Ryan potentially transitioning over. Ryan Hall, if anyone ever agrees to fight him again, which they seem to be ducking him significantly. Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing to look at because it throws up a huge question, because we know that leg locks work in a scenario where you can grapple. You have to account for the fact that you can be punched in the face, but I think that can be accounted for and it can be worked around. So why the fuck are leg locks so low? Like that's again interesting. That could be potentially worked on. Just to finish up, conclusions or considerations anyway. If I can get it to work. Why is this not moving on? There we go. Okay, so considerations. Paretoing your Pareto. You can then endlessly apply Pareto to Pareto results. You can get your 20% that accounts for 80. And then you can, if you can break it down to small enough increments, then you can then apply Pareto to that, and you can have 20% of your 20%, which should account for 8. And it's an endless repetition, and it depends how deep you want to go. It depends on how easily you can break down the inputs.
Could you call that disappearing up your own?
I think it's pointless. I think it needs to be mentioned because it's a thing, and there may be something. There may be something you look at that has a fuckload of inputs, and it can be broken down twice, Pareto. But I think it's pointless. But it's a thing. People do it. And grappling, I don't think it can be applied. The depth versus breadth concept. So this is just applying it to in grappling in general. The way I look at it is you need to have breadth in what you do. Now it's the same with everything. You whatever area you're in, you need to have at least a good wide understanding of everything. So in grappling, you need to have a good understanding or a solid understanding of kind of every position, everything from there. But it doesn't have to be super high level. It's kind of general. But then you have to have your specializations. Picking the specializations and what you go deep on can be influenced by what you find from applying Pareto or applying price. It can be, again, it can be influenced either way. It can be following where the numbers are with those, or it can be going against the grain and maybe going really deep into something like leg locks in MMA, which you may find more success, you may not. But as a general principle for grappling and for most things, if you look at education in general, you will study something at degree level, which will be super fucking general. You'll basically become a GP of a subject. You will learn a wide range of things, and you'll learn fuck all about those things. Okay, then you'll specialize. You'll a little bit. You'll go into like an MSc or like a master's of some kind, and you'll start to narrow it down a little bit, and you'll go to a little bit more of a specific area, and then you'll go on and you'll do either potentially like a PhD, and you'll narrow it down even more to a really, really specific area. So you've started with this really wide breadth, which has allowed you to decide where you want to go, and then you start to go deep and deep and deep and deep, deep, and you've created the specialization. That's kind of how it should work in grappling as well. You find what works for you, you find what you have like a natural kind of affinity towards, and then you start to go deep into that. Okay, and that's what can really kind of shape people's games, is what they have that kind of depth and really, really kind of deep insight into. Something that I don't think gets talked about is what I kind of see as like underlying facilitators. We don't know what the causes of these numbers are, so we don't necessarily know what the causes of these high numbers for the back and all this are. What you can find is potentially that there is something within the 80%, whether it's a technique that sets up the high level finishes, whether it's a position that sets up the high level finishes or the dominant positions. But there may be something in that 80% which is not having that end game efficiency. However, it's contributing to the 20%. So that 20% rely on something in the 80% in order to be efficient. Okay. Is that mental? Do you understand that?
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's interesting. Now that's something I don't, because again, like with Kosh's book and all the other stuff I've read as well, like I don't feel they've really talked about that. They've not talked about something within the 80%, which seems like it's inefficient and seems like it's not contributing anything, actually having this underlying effect, which is kind of propping up the 20%. So for grappling, again, I can't think of how it would apply to grappling. It may do. Again, there are underlying factors of facilitators. They may be kind of difficult to kind of see, but I think it is also something you have to consider and think may be there. So what you may find is by hugely kind of putting all your kind of effort into the 20% may not make that much of a difference, or it may kind of just level out, because there's something in the 80% that if you improve that, it improves the factors in the 20%. How you find it, how you identify that, I have no fucking idea. But I think that's something that could potentially come up. Okay.
That comes down to, sorry, can I just say?
Yeah. No, please, yeah.
That surely comes down to the fact that we, in a sense, measure and analyze finishes. What is, you're measuring, analyzing submissions, you're not, some things are happening that aren't exactly, don't get measured.
Yeah. So there's a quote like, I'm sure I talked about it the other week, like everything you measure is not necessarily effective, and everything effective is you can't necessarily measure. So just because you can get a number and a metric on something and a measure on something doesn't mean that it's relevant. It could be bullshit. But they may be underlying factors or contributors that have a massive impact, but we can't measure them. We can't get a number on them. We can't have any kind of way of judging whether they improve, increase or decrease. Yeah, I think that's that. But then if you look at, they kind of did work backwards a little bit, because they talked about the points were scored from the back, but then they looked at kind of where the back takes came from and that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot that can be looked at, and a lot that can be broken down. This brings me on to my next point. You need data. Now, the concept of Pareto and the Price's law are just, it's irrelevant unless you have something to apply them to. Now, that's why I have a big issue with life coaches and just general kind of, let's all improve our lives and become more efficient and blah, 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 dickheads, quoting this bollocks and telling people, just 80-20, 80-20, 80-20 what? What data? What are you fucking 80-20ing? What are you applying the fucking Pareto to? Well, this is my point. It's bullshit. They don't, like, what they should be talking about.
Just to life ed, you know?
To life ed, man.
You
don't understand that.
Oh my God. But that's my point. The amount of times I've like, you got an 80-20. You apply the 80-20 principle. If you apply the 80-20 principle, it'll change your life. Apply it to what? What am I applying it to?
80-20 that shit.
it's about the data, and that comes down to how you're collecting the data. And like this, that's the really, really fucking important stuff that the kind of the life coaches and just general kind of fraudulent money grabbing hacking fucks. These are the people that are just using this bullshit to impress and confuse people, and they're not actually talking about how you can make it actionable, how you can do shit with it. Because what it comes down to is, are you prepared to then measure everything and get a shitload of data? And also, is that data actually valid? Is it measuring what you want it to know? How reliable is that data? Because if it's not reliable and it's not really measuring what it is and not valid, then you can apply whatever the fuck you want to it. The results are meaningless.
I agree. These life coaches selling Zoom classes and all the rest of it.
Fuck off, all right? Just fuck off, okay? Don't fucking start, all right? If I did a life coach thing, okay, and I did all that kind of happy clappy bollocks, and
then you turn like this,
I would have fucking hundreds of people on Zoom. But because I'm keeping it real, and I is doing my research in it. Do your research. I know how it is in it. I is like dropping truth bombs in it. No one cares.
Look into it.
Watch this YouTube video.
You don't need to do statistics when you're 80-20 in your life.
Fuck off. Oh, but this is going to be a thing now, isn't it? How 80-20? This is why I haven't referred to it as 80-20. Like, the main book that talks about it and has applied it to other areas, like Richard Koch's book, he made it 80-20, and I can't go down that route. Because again, it already had, he's 10th planet in it. He has applied the 10th planet concept to this, okay? It had a fucking name. Why did you call it something else? It was a fucking Pareto brand. Why did you call it something different?
I can't pronounce that.
Rebranded
80-20, easier.
Weird foreign words.
80-20.
Rebranded it.
What's that,
It's a
French
name.
or some shit? Come on.
He
80-20 that shit.
Planeted that. He 10th planeted it. He 10th
He
planeted it before 10th planet even existed.
He took the 20% of it that was good, which was the numbers, to get the success of the 80. He 80-20 Pareto.
Hey, go ahead. That's the name of your school, 80-20 Jiu-Jitsu.
Not gonna happen. Not gonna happen. 80-20. By the way, I've decided I'm going to change the name of the positions, by the way, or at least one. So 50-50. Do you know it's inside, outside, and just general 50-50? When you go inside, do you know how people call it 80-20? Yeah, it's now the Pareto position, or Pareto. Okay?
So potential.
Because we'll do it. Some people won't get it. They'll think we're mental. Some people will get it and they'll be like, oh my God, those guys are so clever. They've taken that position back, and they've scored one for Pareto. Fuck 80-20. It's Pareto.
Why don't you name all the submissions after, like you can have the Archimedes lock and the Newton strangle.
What's a triangle guy? What's Pythagoras? Is he doing triangles or shit?
Yeah, Pythagoras.
Oh my God.
Pythagoras invented the triangle. It's the Pythagoras, I think you'll find.
So you could rename everything, right? Use the 10th planet.
We're going to go back and we're going to put respect on the name of the people who really did this shit. Fuck you guys.
Yeah,
these are the real fucking
innovators. Newton.
These are the ones that went down the fucking path on their own. No one, they thought people thought they were mental. Okay, they did something different. They fucking innovated.
You know, in Brazil they call side control at 100 kilos or something.
Yeah, I think it's a specific type of side control. But yeah, I was taught that as well.
So you could call that the Newton control. Is like gravity control.
Newton control. Okay, yeah. Okay, we could do this. We could do it. I don't think it would sell. I mean, it's not a sexy planet. That's the problem.
Is there like a move like just called the electric chair? The Tesla chair. There you go. Tesla that shit. The Tesla coil.
Tesla coil. Not Command and Conquer. Jesus Christ, like.
Screw it. Command and Conquer it. Done.
There's a crazy, stupid logic.
Best weapon in Command and Conquer. Tesla calls all around your base.
With Tesla troopers.
We're so close to finishing. Let's just finish this.
Then we can talk about Red Alert.
We've got stuck on that last point. Okay, we need to finish this. Grappling is progressive. Okay, so what is the 20% now might not be the 20% in a few years, and we've kind of talked about multiple reasons why this is. Okay, like I say, with leg locks, I believe leg locks are in a kind of downward trajectory in grappling. Because I think They are trained a lot more. They are becoming common positions. The knowledge is better. Teaching of it is better. The understanding of it is better. But I believe it will be more of an upward trajectory in MMA. I think that's where it may become. I think it could be going into the 20% in MMA, but I think it's potentially coming out 20% in grappling. I might be wrong. I'm making a random kind of forecast based on just nothing really. There's no really modeling that's gone into it at all. But as I say, it's progressive. It is not a static kind of thing. It changes. It's fluid in that sense. Okay, so there is leeway for things to move around. If one of you goes off on a random, again, if Ed decides that he's the man that's going to make the north-south choke the thing, and he becomes incredibly efficient on it, if somebody gets really good at something, people start to copy them, and Ed could make north-south choke to a 20% technique.
You haven't seen my background yet, have you, Ed?
Not yet. I'm about to. So I'm done. I've finished. Fuck you guys.